Hey everybody, welcome to this YouTube video. I'm going to show you how to make a pair of boxers that are adjustable in style. This is the final product here from the video. You'll notice that there are two buttons at the top. That's going to allow them to be adjustable. It's more of a styling than anything. You're not going to really want to adjust them. It'll give the boxers a certain look. You'll notice with a lot of the retail boxers, the boxers that are adjustable, that the elastic on the inside is not shown because the fabric is folded over and under the elastic on the inside, and it's going to create that rippling effect. I find that to be uncomfortable in the long run when you're wearing them because it'll start indenting on your skin. So I created a pattern that would allow for the elastic to sit against your skin instead of having that rippling fabric sitting against your skin creating that indentation. In the description below, you'll find a link where you can download the pattern of these boxers. The first step is to add a zigzag stitch at each of the inseams and each of the leg openings. The purpose of this is to prevent the fraying of the fabric, and the zigzag stitch should be between 3 and 5 millimeters in width. Let's go ahead and complete the leg openings. Here we have the bad side facing upwards. Fold the fabric 1/2 inch and pin it down all along the leg openings. Sew a straight stitch where we made our zigzag stitch. Add a few back stitches at the beginning and the end to create a knot. With the two front panels, lay one on top of the other with the good sides facing each other. At the curve of the fabric above the inseam, place pins along that curve. Now we're going to sew a straight stitch 1/2 inch from the edge, starting at the top of the curve, ending at the inseam. Let's clean it up a little bit. To prevent the fraying of the fabric, let's go ahead and create a zigzag stitch along the edge of the fabric of the curve. With the bad sides of the two front panels facing upwards, take the seam allowance from the straight stitch that we just made from the curve and fold it to the left. We're going to create a straight stitch along the zigzag stitch that we just made. Next, take the two back panels, face them together, and pin them together. Now we are going to sew a straight stitch 3/4 of an inch along that edge to create the back middle seam. Take the seam allowance and fold it in half, and then fold it again, pinning it down to the left back panel. The reason we have a greater seam allowance is because we are going to create a double felled seam. This will give the boxers a professional look. Create a straight stitch along the edge of the fold. After that's completed, flip the panels over with the good sides facing upwards. Make another straight stitch where I have visualized for you. This will complete the double felled seam. We're going to create a double felled seam, just like we've done with the two back panels. And that is not videoed, so follow the same steps as you've done for the two back panels. With the good sides facing each other, pin together the left front panel inseam to the left back panel inseam, and then do the same for the right side. Make a straight stitch 1/2 inch from the edge to sew together the inseams. With the good sides facing upwards, draw a line 1/2 inch from the top at each of the panels. If you are making these for yourself and you want to dial in the waist size, go ahead and measure just above your hips where you want the boxers to sit. For me, it's about 29 inches. Your elastic needs to be 1.5 inches in width. If you have the option, choose to buy a soft elastic waistband because that's going to be the most comfortable against your body. Do not cut the waistband exactly on the waist size. Add an extra 2.5 inches at the end. In the video, I only added 1.5 inches, which made my life a little bit harder, which you will see later. You also may want to add 1 inch to the other end. Draw a mark on the waistband at the recommended 2.5 inches that you added at the end. Because I only added 1.5 inches at the end, my mark is going to reflect that. Here we have the right front panel facing upwards. Take that extra 2.5 inches of waistband, line it up along that line we drew on the top of the fabric. Pin it down at the fly. With the left front panel facing upwards, measure 2 inches along that line we drew. Make a mark 2 inches from the edge. At the 2-inch mark we just made, take the other end of your waistband, pin it along the 1/2 inch longitudinal line we made at the top. Per my recommendation earlier, if you added 1 inch to this side of the waistband, make sure that 1 inch allowance lines up with the 2-inch mark we made, not including the extra allowance we made to one or both ends of the waistband. We now want to mark the halfway point at the waistband. Mark another halfway point at the 2 halves. Take the waistband, line the true halfway mark with the seam connecting the 2 back panels. Pin the waistband 1/2 inch from the top along that longitudinal line we made. Take the 1/4 mark of the waistband and line it up with the seam connecting the front and back panels. Pin it down at the longitudinal line we made. Do the same thing with the remaining mark on the waistband, where the seam connects the other front and back panel. Pay very close attention here. Start at the left front panel. Sew a straight stitch as close to the edge as you can of the elastic waistband. Full disclosure, the type of stitch I'm doing here is a combination of forward and backward stitches. I find that it helps seal the waistband a little bit better than a straight stitch. If your sewing machine has that option, I recommend trying that. Keep in mind, I did not add 1 inch of allowance to the waistband on this side. No matter what, you're going to start 2 inches from the edge of the fabric. One thing you will see though, is I did make a 1.5 inch mark at the edge of my elastic waistband. I recommend you do that too. Once you sew to that 1.5 inch mark, keep the needle in. Use your left hand to stretch one end of the elastic, and use your right hand to stretch the elastic where you pinned the elastic to the fabric. Continue sewing your stitches as you have that tension. Once you hit the allowance on the other end of the elastic, keep the needle in, because it will help you pull without the foot of the sewing machine getting in the way. Once you hit the allowance on the other end of the elastic, make a couple back stitches and you are done. With the bad side facing upward, take the right front panel and sew the same type of stitch 1/4 inch from the top. Start at the line we made and make sure to add tension from the start. You absolutely need to have 1 to 2 millimeters of fabric showing at the top edge as you sew. Otherwise, when wearing the boxers, you'll be able to see the elastic. Sew all the way to the other end of the elastic until you hit the line you made, and continue sewing without any tension until you hit the end. One more stitch for the waistband. Repeat the previous stitch 1/4 inch from the bottom of the elastic. We need to get rid of the excess elastic at the right front panel. Do not cut exactly on the line that you made. Give yourself 1/4 inch into the allowance and then cut there. In a moment, you will understand why we kept some of the allowance. Fold the fabric 1.5 inches from the top, and then again 1.5 inches from the top. Then fold the fabric 1.5 inches from the edge. And then again 1.5 inches from the edge. Pin it down onto the elastic. Continue the fold all the way down to form the fly. Put a pin in it to hold it in place. Run a straight stitch 1/4 inch along that edge, stopping 1/4 inch from the top. Run another straight stitch very close to the edge of the folded fabric. Keep it narrower than 1/4 inch, that way when you get to the top you are sewing directly on the elastic. Leave the needle in 1/4 inch from the top, turn the fabric, and then continue sewing across the top 1/4 inch until you meet the other stitch. With the right front panel, sew a straight stitch 1.5 inches from the top, connecting the line already made from the elastic, stopping 1/4 inch from the edge. For the left front panel, fold the edge 1/2 inch and then fold the fabric 1.5 inches, laying it on top of the elastic and pinning it down. Sew a straight stitch 1/4 inch from the edge, starting 1/4 inch from the top. Stop when you reach the end of the fold. Sew another straight stitch where we made that fold, starting 1/4 inch from the top and ending at the end of the fold. Still with the left front panel, sew a straight stitch 1/4 inch from the top, connecting the 2 stitches we just made. It wasn't shown, but make sure to sew a straight stitch 1.5 inches from the top, just like we did with the other panel. Line up the 2 flies. Pin it down at the end of the fly. Turn the boxers inside out just to double check to make sure the flies are laying perfectly on top of each other. We're going to close the bottom of the fly. Refer to the lines I have drawn on screen. Make a straight stitch along the lines. The next step is not shown. To make it adjustable, make 2 buttons to connect the top of the fly, and then 1 button to connect the middle of the fly. I recommend referring to your sewing machine instruction manual for how to do buttons and buttonholes. After this step, your boxers are finally completed.